I'm going to move us along to the next talk. So thank you all. And welcome independent consultants and longtime partners or people with long-term relationships within the Conservation Measures Partnership, Elizabeth O'Neill and Sheila O'Connor, to talk to us about the Conservation Audit Tool. So thank you, Elizabeth and Sheila. Over to you guys.
Thanks, Matt. This is Sheila. So Elizabeth and Catherine, Claire, and Erica from the Audit Working Group are going to take us through just the update on the Conservation Audit Tool and some testimonials on organizational use of the audit tool. And then Erica is going to talk about an opportunity to participate in conservation auditing within your own organizations. So over to Elizabeth.
Hello, CMP and CCNet. Nice to see all your faces, or some of your faces and a lot of your names. This is a working group presentation. I would have to say we're probably the coolest and most fun working group. So if you want to be part of the coolest and most fun working group, you're welcome to join. So I'm going to start with an overview presentation of where we are with the Conservation Audit Guideline and Tool. And then Claire and Catherine are going to talk about their experiences auditing with their organizations, and Erica is going to jump in and tell us about an ask that's being made of all of you to give conservation auditing a whirl within the next several months. So I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Hopefully this will work well. And I'd like you all to ponder this question for 30 seconds. How do you know whether all of your efforts to promote the open standards or an equivalent framework are actually succeeding? What is your measure of success there? Many people on this call invest a lot of energy in trying to advance the best practices laid out in the open standards. And so the question for you is, what is your measure of success? How do you know if it's working? I'll just let you think about that for a second. And if you're like, you know, I'm really not sure, I don't really have a means to figure that out, you might consider conservation auditing. So a conservation audit is a review of the extent to which the design and management of a conservation project or program reflects best practices as laid out in the conservation standards or an equivalent framework. Audits review the conservation process rather than its effectiveness or impact. Effectiveness and impact, of course, we leave for the practice of evaluation. And to support conservation auditing by our community, the CMP Audit Guidelines and Tool version 3.0 have just been released after quite a bit of work by the Conservation Audits Working Group over the last couple of years. So why do and promote conservation auditing? So the primary goal of an audit is to increase the likelihood of positive outcomes by helping to assess design and adaptive management practice, including whether or not M&E is being done well, and to identify a clear set of priorities for strengthening the design and management of the project. Audits can also help to identify priorities to focus a conservation standards-based planning process. So if you're jumping in to help an existing ongoing conservation project or program to strengthen its strategic design and adaptive management, you might start with an audit actually to identify what the priorities are to focus on for your planning process. Audits can help to serve as an approachable entry point to the conservation standards, getting folks quickly oriented to the standards. They can help to draw a team together for reflection and exchange. And doing audits can help to facilitate learning by a team and by an organization. So I want to give you a quick overview of conservation auditing. And I know many of you have had exposure to auditing in the past. Maybe you sat in on our webinar that we did a little while back, but we just want to make sure that all of you on this call are oriented to auditing, particularly given the ask that's coming out from the CMP board. So who should do conservation audits? Anyone involved in a conservation effort. If you want to check in to see whether or not your design and adaptive management practice are up to snuff, if they're up to the standards, do an audit. What gets audited? You can audit, just like the standards are applicable at any scale to any type of project or program, you can audit projects of any scale or type. You can even audit your organizational practice. The audit tool supports that. When do you use them? Anytime in the project cycle, or ideally regularly, particularly for your highest investment projects and programs. And how do you get started? Well, we have transitioned from what used to be an Excel-based tool to a Google site, which has all the guidelines on it and also gives you a link to, I'm going to switch over here and share, gives you a link to the audit template. So here's the Google site. It's really easy to navigate. Maybe one of my compatriots can drop the link into the chat if you would. So here you have the homepage, which gives you an overview, then a more detailed introduction. You get detailed instructions for doing an audit, actually going through it with some notes and tips provided. And then we have supporting and detailed guidelines, like should we do an audit? What type of audit should we do? Auditing versus evaluations. So there's lots of detailed guidance. And then here you can jump over to the audit template. And if I could get this menu at the top of my screen out of the way, I can get over there. So in the conservation audit tool itself, it is a Google Sheets workbook now, so it's really easily accessible to everyone. You would basically make a copy of this. You could make a copy still in Google Sheets for yourself, or you could make a copy into Microsoft Excel for your organization, and then you just work your way through the workbook. The workbook is equipped to handle, I think, 5 project or program audits right now. For each audit, you'd go through and fill out project and audit information. You'd actually do the audit. And the way the audit is done is that you have all of the conservation standards, steps, sub-steps, and some criteria all down here on the left. And then there are scoring criteria out to the right. So you review the step, sub-step, and primary criterion. And then you look across the rating scale 4 to 1, and you choose which one of those applies to your project or program and provide a justification. And it's pretty straightforward to fill out. Then it auto-generates a summary report. And it begins to populate a management response. So it rolls up the scores by sub-step. And then you fill out, what will the project team do to improve this factor in the next couple of years? What additional resources might you need? By what date will the improvements be made? And who has primary responsibility? So it supports all of that for up to 5 project or program audits. Then it'll do a roll-up if you want to get a broader view. And also supported is an organizational assessment, which lays out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 organizational scale enabling conditions for doing great design and adaptive management. Obviously, if you see factors missing, like M&E is not great across all your projects, sometimes that's actually attributable to what's going on at the organizational scale in terms of resourcing, guidance, mandate. So this helps you to do that organizational scale assessment. So it's a really straightforward, user-friendly tool, at least based on all the testing and feedback we've gotten. So we really encourage you to give it a try. And because we're pretty tight on time, I'm actually going to hand over now to, who gets to go first? Claire? To talk briefly about doing auditing with her organization.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Alton. I'm with the Endangered Wildlife Trust based in South Africa. The EWT is dedicated to conserving threatened species and ecosystems in East and Southern Africa to the benefit of all people. The EWT is also up for CMP membership, so this is my little shout out. We initiated the process of adopting and institutionalizing the conservation standards into all of our projects and programs in about 2018. And for the most part, all of our projects and programs, they had been running for some time already. We had donor requirements to fulfill. So we needed to fit the standards sort of retrospectively to our projects. In 2019, we conducted our first conservation audit to understand how well we were doing in terms of integrating this process. We used the tool to compare across our range of 13 programs. All of our 13 programs are structured very differently. So we needed to identify which of our teams required urgent assistance and how we should prioritize our time and resources and capacity. We also compared across the conservation standard steps. So we wanted to understand which of the steps required additional effort. And through this process, we learned that we really needed to streamline and prioritize processes and develop tools to make it easy for teams to collect, standardize, and analyze project data. We then conducted a follow-up audit in 2020 so that we were able to assess progress over time between the different programs. And we used these results as a means to attempt to incentivize our teams, maintain momentum in terms of the use of the conservation standards and Miradi across the organization. We found the tool to be super flexible. We adapted it to suit our organization's needs and requirements. We thought it was incredibly useful, and it's been an integral part of the process of institutionalizing the conservation standards into EWT. Kath, over to you.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Payne. I work for Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust. I'm based in the UK. Our organisation works on critically endangered species and also protected areas across the world, but with a big focus in places like Madagascar, Mauritius, and some of the other key island ecosystems. Our story is remarkably similar to EWT in lots of ways. We started adopting the conservation standards organisationally end of 2017, start of 2018. And I joined the audit working group not long after that. So it was a nice sort of dovetail of implementing the standards and then also learning about how we can measure and answer that question that Elizabeth posed right at the top of her presentation. So some of the questions that we wanted to ask sort of 2 years into our conservation standards journey, how are we going in that journey? You know, are there certain areas of the cycle, like Claire was saying, are there certain areas of the cycle where universally we are stronger or not as strong? Are there particular programs that need more support? Are there some that are doing really well? And then also we were really interested in this organizational roll-up that Elizabeth was mentioning as well. So how can we get that? What is our conservation audit score for the whole organization, and compare that to before or as we were beginning adopting the conservation standards to where we are now, and then where we want to improve in the future. So yeah, again, echoing Claire, we found the tool really, really useful. We made a few adaptations as well. So Elizabeth mentioned there's, in the current format, there's 5 projects that you can run within that. So we expanded that out a little bit more. So we've got more of our programs within projects and programs within one sheet, which was super easy to adapt and do. So that was really helpful. We also wanted to look at change over time, as I mentioned, so from the starting point or a baseline, and we'll continue working through every year for each of those projects. And we're starting to integrate this audit process into the annual pause and reflect workshops that each of the program teams do. And the other thing I guess I just wanted to mention is that this has actually become, we're doing a lot of work internally at the moment on organizational level impact measurement, key performance indicators, things like that. And actually the conservation audit tool, or I think we're going to end up calling it the conservation effectiveness score or something like that, because everybody wants to change the names of things. But that's now becoming one of those organizational key performance indicators that's reported to the board on a quarterly or an annual basis. And that's, as it happens, it's literally being presented to them on Thursday. So really, really nice way of emphasising to the board of trustees how important adaptive management and these processes and systems are to the functioning of the organisation, and then also showing how we're improving that over time. So again, kind of echoing Claire, but really, really helpful for an organisation, and also to sort of build capacity in people's understanding of where their plans and programs are strong. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So just to jump in to answer a few frequently asked questions before we jump to Erica talking about the ask of all of you. As I said, it's great to consider doing an audit as a diagnostic before you launch into a planning, particularly for an existing project or program. It's a great thing to use audits to track organizational uptake of best practices, which Claire and Catherine both just spoke to. A good audit can take anywhere from, say, 2 to 8 hours. So it's not a super intensive exercise. 2 hours if you do it by yourself for a project you know well, 8 hours if you involve the whole project or program team in a reflection exercise to do the audit together. It's not a high cost exercise. You can do it virtually. You can do it just the way we're talking now. The content of the audit tool can be adapted to align with organizational terminology and frameworks, just like the standards themselves. We haven't yet had it translated. We think we have a question out to the CMP board about whether or not that's possible. And we encourage everyone who does auditing to try to share your audit results as much as possible, to share organizational learning and also learning by our whole community. We think that'll help us all to get better at figuring out even how as a community to focus our efforts. If we see everybody across the board is really struggling with steps 4 and 5, that's an indication to us as a community that we need to invest more effort in building capacity in those areas. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica, who's going to talk about some great steps we could take as a community to use auditing to get better.
That's a great segue. I'm not going to go into like what the International Crane Foundation has been doing to use audits, because it's very similar to what Claire and Catherine shared. But what I wanted to do is draw your attention to an email that probably all of you got about an hour and a half ago, maybe 2 hours ago, that is asking you as a community to trial this audit tool, to start using it. We think it's valuable. It's something that CMP has wanted and has invested a lot of money in developing, that the working group has worked on, but it's CMP's audit tool, and we want us as a community to start using it. And so we have requested that at least all of the CMP members try to use this audit tool towards at least one of your projects and programs that you either implement or support. Also to do that organizational assessment, Elizabeth showed you that one tab. And then to share your results, at least some portion of your results, some summary, as well as some feedback, so that we can learn as a community how conservation auditing can help us to assess how well we're doing at taking up these best practices and applying them to hopefully have a greater conservation impact in the end. So the email is out there. There's an incentive. So we have put 2 $500 discounts off of your next either CCNet rally or CMP retreat. And one is designated specifically to CMP organizations, because we really want our CMP member organizations to use this tool. And so the first of you who actually go in and complete these steps that will be put into a drawing for that discount. And then the other discount is for the whole community. So all of you CCNetters out there who are interested in applying the audit tool, do that in the organizations that you work for or support. And basically it's the same sort of sign up, and we'll provide the same sort of support and ask you for the same type of feedback. But there's another award or discount incentive that is for the first organization that applies the conservation audit tool towards at least 5 projects or programs. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that there is a sign up list that I just put into the chat that is also in your email. It's a really simple Google form. Once you know who the right contact is for trialing the audit tool, you should be able to fill out that form without a problem. And we'll get you going, and we'll follow up once people have filled out that form with information about how to provide your feedback and your results. And you can also reach out to any of us on the working group or the working group in general for support. And that's it. Thank you.
So we're finished up there, Matt. All of us, there's only one person from the audit working group who isn't on the call, Eleanor Carswell from Bush Heritage, but we were all copied on the email that Erica's talking about. So do get in touch if you have specific questions. Thank you, everybody.
And I don't
You guys
know if
are
we have time
under-
to take any questions. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you
what-
guys are under time. We have time for questions. Great to see Erica, Catherine, and Claire, especially Claire. It's nice to see CMP candidates being already actively involved. Any questions?
Hey, Matt, this is Richard. Hi. Hi, Sheila and Elizabeth and team. It's great to see you all, and it's really great to see all the fantastic progress on this really important concept. Sheila, this is probably a question more for you. I can remember traveling around Vietnam and places like that with you doing audits where we were doing actually cross-institutional audits where we had, I think the rule was 3 or 4 CMP members would all get together and do audits of different members' projects. And that was just such a fantastic experience in terms of the cross-institutional learning. I was wondering if there's any thought or plans for promoting those. I know it's more complicated than having individual organizations do their own audits, but it was just so rich from a learning perspective. I was wondering if there's any thought or planning related to that.
Well, just to echo what you said, I mean, when we used to do those together, you know, I learned so much as an individual, but also for the institution I was with, WWF at the time. We haven't specifically talked about that, but we have in the guidance, we've talked about different ways you could actually conduct audits. So as Elizabeth said, you know, you can do them virtually, you can do them as an individual or with teams, you can do them, I think what you're talking about would fall into peer-to-peer audits, I think that category, which would be enriching for everyone. But apart from, you know, suggesting those are different ways to conduct audits, we as a working group haven't really discussed it specifically with the board, but I don't know whether anybody else has a contribution to make for that.
I think that's ideal world. Unfortunately, what we saw when we tried that approach before is that they are expensive and time consuming. It's hard to get organizations to commit to them. If we approached auditing as that's the way to do it, I think that creates a bit of a barrier to uptake. You know, we want first and foremost for these to be done as widely as possible. But if it can be done through a peer audit exercise, if you can get the funding and the commitment of the organization to do that, that's great. I think it would be interesting to think about maybe trying to facilitate some virtual peer audit sessions. There are probably ways we could do that, actually low cost and efficiently, involving representatives of multiple organizations, plus an invited project team to represent, to kind of do that together. I bet there are some cool ways we could do that.
Yeah, so thank you. And Matt has said that it's time to move on to the business part of this. So thanks for everybody's attention, but please don't hesitate to get in touch and ask us any questions. Great to see everybody.
Great to see the development of this over the years.